Hello and welcome back to the third channel. Yes, I got that right this time, unlike last time where it went horrifically wrong, but we all laughed. Ha ha ha. And so we're back with another glorious interview. And so we'll crack on. Today I have a very special guest. To me, and to most people, he is, because he's done a lot in his career, he's done a lot, so that's why I emphasize that. He's best known as one of the creators of a few games in the Crystal Maze. It's the wonderful David!
Hi Tom, thanks for inviting me.
Welcome. So we'll start at the very beginning. How did you get into puzzle making and game show type making?
Well, I always was quite a gamey child. I would always make little puzzles, board games, and things that I'd play with my family when I was, I don't know, about 10 or 11 or so. I'd always do puzzle magazines with my mum and do Scrabble with my grandma. So in terms of actually writing things, I remember sending off some puzzles and quiz questions to a magazine, maybe when I was about 16 or 17. And also, I would just, for one reason or another, I just decided to start sending stuff into television shows. So it was just a way of going from something that I did for fun to something that I ended up doing professionally.
And how did you get to work on the Crystal Maze?
So yeah, so this was I'm that old that I worked on the original Crystal Maze with Richard O'Brien. So that came on television, was it about 1990 or so? So that was a show where um, people would do these games, and when I went to bed, having seen the first show, I just thought, wow, this is a really different show. Just the scale of it, just the sheer size of it was very different to anything that we'd ever seen on television before, really. And certainly in sort of studio shows. So I just sort of went to bed and thinking, oh, maybe they could do this or that or the other as a game. And for whatever reason, I just opened up my what probably at that time would have been Word version 3.0, and sketch some ideas out on isometric paper and bundle them off to the address I'd managed to find for the production company, Chatsworth Television. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a letter back from the director, David G. Croft, saying we would like to use one for a Christmas special for the children's show. And here's £100. And I went, oh, okay, there's money in this, is there? And that's not going to change my life. But I just thought, okay, that I realized that people need content and they're willing to pay money for that content. So I submitted bundles of maybe about 30 ideas or so, of which they would cherry pick the best, somewhere between 3 and 6, over the next sort of, what was it, 4 years or so. And so whenever one of my games was used on the show, then I'd get my name in the credits.
And why do you reckon that the Crystal Maze was so successful as a format for a program itself?
Um, that's not really something I've thought about a lot, I have to be honest. Obviously, Richard O'Brien's a huge part of it, and he brought with him natural fans of his, and also his very charming, very he just looked very different. I mean, I wasn't aware that he deliberately shaved his head to look like that. He just looked like a sort of little genie that he'd been dressed up as that for the role, and obviously he was a massive part of it. If it was done as a more straightforward show, that didn't have its own world built within it, I don't think it would be quite the same. I think it's also an example of a show where people really wanted to be on it, and that can be something that is good as a good feature for game shows. If you feel like, oh man, I really want to go in the Crystal Dome and grab all the tokens, even though that part of the show makes no sense whatsoever compared to the rest of the show, that's the thing that everybody really wanted to do. Um, and then also, I think the third reason is it was massively popular with younger audiences, with sort of children and younger people. Um, and so it was from that sense. Although it was quite late at night. I think it was 8:30 or so. It was intended to be like premium quality, relatively adult viewing. But it ended up going younger and younger and younger in the audience, and they would have repeats at 6 o'clock for younger people to be able to see.
And not only have you done the Crystal Maze, you've done another program that I would personally say was not at the same popularity standard, but in the same sort of vein as the Crystal Maze. It's like a cousin of the Crystal Maze, shall I say? What was it like working on the UK version of the Mole?
Yeah, well, I didn't do massive amounts of that. I chipped in at some like, two or three ideas for that. One of which I was able to use a bit of my maths degree for because it had a bit of a game theory in it. It was a challenge where there was like four different prizes, and you had to try and get everybody to pick a different prize. Otherwise, the prize wasn't used. So that was kind of fun. And then I also did a relatively iconic idea for a game that they tweaked a bit, um, which was the one where they had like a paintballing challenge that led into a bomb diffusing game. And the bomb diffusing game had a few tropes of mine in terms of um, just the way that was set up. So um, yeah, I was happy to be able to like chip in a few ideas for that.
Yeah. And when you see your games and your concepts on TV, does that bring a joyful feeling, or do you get like a little bit embarrassed that your stuff's on TV?
Oh no, I'm really, really proud of when my stuff goes on television, and I've been very fortunate to work with great producers. I think that's the important thing. If you feel like your material is slightly being misused, or like yeah, people get like a question card and they sort of throw it just throw it away or something dismissively, going, "Oh, what a rubbish question. Let's have another one." Then you sort of think, "Oh, what's the point of me writing these things?" But if your games are really well made. They've got great props, and particularly if you've got a good result out of them, you sort of go, "Oh wow, that really worked well." Like they won with only 3 seconds left. You sort of go, "Oh okay, that was a good day at the office." So um, I think yeah, I always get a frisson when I see my name scroll up amongst the 100 other names that are yeah, on any TV show. It's nice to be there.
And you've done various different roles within these game shows, quiz shows, and other type of various versions of the similar format. Well, what was it like being a consultant on arguably Netflix's weirdest British program, Flinch?
Yeah, that was only a couple of days worked out one, but yes, they showed me the tape for that, and they said that Netflix were keen on it. So the Finch was this show where people were. The problem with it was, and it was slightly a flaw in the format, in that you couldn't actually do anything to anybody. You couldn't actually hurt them, which is fine, but that really did limit the amount of tricks you could use. In terms of all right, you could do big bangs and do explosions and effects and things, but if you couldn't actually, like, you don't want to taser them, but there's only so much you could do. And so I did a couple of days work for them to submit some ideas for things that they potentially could do. But um, the the pilot show I saw was really brilliant, and I don't think necessarily that the show that came out the other end was quite as good, if I'm completely honest, because I think the sort of the betting aspect of it that they had was sort of somehow downplayed. But yes, certainly an interesting one, that one.
Yeah, and Flinch to me reminded me, and it's weird that it reminded me of the American game show Hurl, where they have to try and make the contestant be as sick as possible. So they do everything possible. They spin, spin. The more sick you are, the more chance you will win. And that reminded me of that because it's like a weird. You wouldn't think the BBC or anyone would have picked up Flinch to begin with because no one's that weird. But Netflix, they've got money to spare.
Well, I think when I'm devising games, I tend not to do the more extreme reality type stuff. So I wouldn't really work on a show like I'm Celebrity, let's say. Um, but even so, when I'm doing a challenge, I try and do things that I would like to do myself, even if it's like a slightly scary challenge. But I think if you can always put yourself in the shoes of the contestant and have some empathy about what they're about to go through, whether it's a challenge show or whether it's a quiz show, because I did actually be a contestant on a couple of shows just for fun to see what it was like when I wasn't quite so much in the industry, and it is quite a different experience. So yeah, I think you it's always good to empathize with the contributors and work out what you want them to do and whether you're willing to put a human being through something that you've devised. Because obviously, if it goes wrong, and they become psychologically damaged through it or physically damaged through it, then that's not a great thing. You don't want that hanging over your head for the rest of your career.
And you also worked on a program that was a little bit more tamer than Hurl, but also weirded me out because Susan Calman, the host of said program, never actually sat on the chair that she was stood always in front of, which now what was it like working on Armchair Detective?
That was great fun. I always have loved things like there's a very, very obscure 1970s show, I think, called Who Done It, that you can sometimes find in various obscure corners of the internet. I think they did a DVD release of that eventually. And then I love the sort of things like the Ace Attorney games. I just think they're brilliant, especially the earlier ones, where you try and work out as a solicitor how the crime is done. So it was great fun to be able to do that. I'm not sure I did a brilliant job on it because just the way that you have to use a television camera on a drama. So, for example, if you had a character and you want them to appear frustrated and you want them to like scrunch up a piece of paper, you really have to sort of get the director to sort of like have a separate shot of the hands screwing up the piece of paper. It can't be a wide shot of somebody doing it subtly in the background because people just don't notice. So I think I needed a bit more training in terms of the rules of how to direct drama, and also they had no time whatsoever to do a lot of the complicated shots. They only had about like a day and a half to film all the cases, that the VTs, and it was a complicated show because what you had to do was film the drama and then come to a television studio and then film the game bit of it and then edit that as well. So there was like two sets of edits involved in that show. It was quite expensive, especially for BBC daytime. But it was great fun. Me and another guy I work with a lot called Dan Peake, another puzzle person, we would do bizarre experiments like working out whether it's possible to take the top off a Coke bottle without breaking the seal and things like that. We just try these things out in the office, and work out how various evidence can be planted. So that was a really fun one to work on.
And if the BBC had given it like more time and given it more money and more episodes in it, do you reckon it would have been even better than it already was?
I think if I have to be absolutely honest, I think the place for that show probably would have been an early Saturday show. I think it was always going to be a bit expensive as a daytime show, unless you're going to give it the budget of something like Doctors. But like even Doctors has been cancelled now. So I think doing it as a once weekly thing. I did genuinely think that they done a very good job at getting good players on the show, and Susan was a great host for it. And I think we were starting to hit our stride a little bit. I think some of the cases were quite good, and they were Um, there was like a good the start of a good chemistry building there. But yeah, it was always going to be an expensive show. I think they did look at trying to do a way of cutting down the filming a bit by making it a bit more like the two detectives chatting to each other, reminiscing about cases that they'd solved in the past, and it being done more in flashback. Um, so that would have helped. I think that what they could have maybe done is done it a bit like Inside Number Nine, of having a much more limited crowd of actors, so you feel like you had to have different actors for absolutely every single episode. Because I think they used something in the order of 250 different people, and that's I think that was like most of East Lothian's uh, acting stock was on that show at some point or other.
Yeah, and I think what would have made it even better, and to make it like odd that Susan never actually sat on the chair she was always stood in front of, they could have done like an Alan Davis says Yet Untitled type thing where it's like a round table and they had them in the round table so that they had the monitors. It's like when they had Top Gear and they had the monitors on the screen, they could have the monitors upwards so that they could have like all sat and it would have looked less weird that Susan was the only one actually stood up the entire time and everyone
And
else all sat down.
it might have been fun if she wasn't in on the cases, but like she was, I think she used to be a criminal barrister or something. Or she definitely had previous in that profession, so she might have been too good at the game, unfortunately.
And one of the things that you worked on that previously that any dear viewers will know that I am a very big fan of. B, I've interviewed one of the sneaky people that tried to interrupt the people on the show. What's it like working on QI?
Yeah, so I did a very niche project for it for Series P. I know that a lot of the team on QI who write the scripts for the main show, but they invited me in and said, Sandy Toksvig is like a real fan of these sort of hidden treasure hunt things. And because it's Series P, we want to do a puzzle for it. So what we did was we invented this character called Pandora, who had her own Twitter account, and she would sort of like say I have a fake like a photo of like a coffee mug saying, "Hey, I'm really excited for my first day at the QI offices," and we had this whole backstory for her. And in the credits for every episode, her surname would change, and her surname would change to a different anagram of something. And there was confirmers in the main part of the show to give you a hint of what the anagram was. And so these 16 keywords you would reveal various URLs that would go to 4 different puzzles that were online. And then if you took those 4 answers and put them into the master puzzle, it would say, well done, please email us on this email address. And I think we had about over 100 people solve it. And then I think the top 10 people were invited down to see the recording of the show and have a photo with Sandy. But yeah, I've always loved those sorts of uh, what's lazily called masquerade type puzzles based on the old masquerade treasure hunt book that started that kind of fad off.
And where did your love of puzzles like begin? When you were younger, did you solve all the puzzle books that were in existence?
Yeah, I'm just looking at my shelves here because I had some. There we go. I happen to have a few out here. So, for example, I still remember the day when my family went to like a motorway service station and we picked up this book here, which is a compendium of 2 different books, one by Trevor Turin and one by Giles Brandreth, and it was just like a really really good sort of illustrated book, loads and loads of variety of logic puzzles and word puzzles and picture puzzles and things. And of course, when I was in the 80s, growing up in the 80s, like all the Trivial Pursuit stuff was big. So you'd have these sort of like big fat books of trivia questions that would come out. And then there'd be things like Puzzle Trail, which is a show on children's TV, and all Clive Doig's programs. with Johnny Ball, who I actually got to meet a couple of times. Oh, there we are, Johnny Ball, Johnny Ball Think Box. That was big, and then there was also these again going back to Armchair Detectives. You'd have these like little murder mystery stories that were like puzzles that you had to sort of solve. Like here's a 2 minute story to read. Like, can you work out how the murder was done, or how did they catch the killer? So yeah, I would absolutely. I think was it those sort of like Scholastic Book Club magazines that you'd get at school, and while other people were like reading Black Beauty or Tale of Two Cities or whatever, I would I would always look for the game books, the choose your own adventure books, fighting fantasy books, the puzzle books, anything like that.
And do you reckon that when the evolution of panel shows got bigger and bigger, do you reckon that helped, or do you reckon that hindered the world of quiz shows and game shows?
A good question. I mean, I've met David Mitchell a couple of times because of my work with Victoria Corin Mitchell, and the way he puts it is, it's nice to be able to sort of turn up to a studio, do a show, and put it to bed, and it's done. It's not like a sitcom or a sketch show where you're writing for weeks or months beforehand, and then you've got to organize costumes and props and guest actors, and it's very complicated. It's just nice to sort of rock up, do a show, do some gags, go home, get paid. In terms of quizzes, obviously we've vastly embraced the model that was started with Peter Bazalgette with Ready Steady Cook, in terms of transforming shows from being not just something that an audience would turn up, see one show, and then go home. We now are in more of a factory situation where we make 4, 5, 6 shows a day, um, and that's something that's affected quiz shows and panel shows. Something of a detriment in some ways, because obviously canned audiences are more of a thing now, because you can't get people to come up to Cardiff at 9:30 in the morning to watch something. So yeah, it's a tricky one. It's been a necessary evil, because obviously the crew have got to be more efficient. They've got to crack on with things and try and do as many shows as they can in the time they've got available. Uh, it's just not possible to make 250 episodes of something like The Chase on the basis that we used to do it in the past, of like doing one or maybe two shows a day. You'd spend a third of your professional career just doing one show, and people just don't do that anymore.
And there's a very good quiz show based comedy podcast that have mentioned this, but I don't think the answer was satisfactory enough, in my opinion. What is the difference between a game show and a quiz show?
Um, well, the old-fashioned answer for this, that Jeremy Beadle, the former Game for Life presenter, used to say, was that a game show is one where you stand up, and a quiz show is one where you sit down. And I think there is, to some extent, some truth in that. I I just think it's a case of with a quiz show, it's a more case of, do you know this thing? With a game show, I think it's a more case of, can you work these things out, or can you use a set of rules to to work something out? But it's not a terribly satisfactory thing. But I mean, the word game is a very rubber band elastic term. Do you treat a sport as a game? Do you treat something like Survivor as a game? Do you treat obviously quizzes are more accepted as a game. There's a lot of things that you could call games, but also you could say that a lot of games, really all they are stories. They have a beginning, middle, and an end. There's just like a resolution to them, whether it's a good or a bad resolution. I think Richard Osman in the past has said something like, "Oh, really, everything that is on television pretty much is a story, whether it's a drama, a reality show, or a quiz show. They're all ways of telling stories."
And you mentioned earlier about you working with the wonderful, the now hilarious, even though she was funny before, but since she's appeared on Taskmaster, she became even more funnier. What was it like working on Only Connect?
Well, it was marvelous working with Victoria. I was the first question editor on that show for about the first 8 series. Um, and she it's always helpful if you have somebody who's a bit quizzy, and she's the sort of person that gets out of the box of Trivial Pursuit at Christmas and does little quizzes with her friends and family. So not only is she knows the kind of tropes of quizzing, which is useful, and knows some of the ins and outs of the intricacies of the questions. But she knows how to run something fairly. That's very useful. And it's so useful if someone just cares about the game. Um, there are some, I'm not saying all, but there are some presenters that just sort of rock up, treat it as another job, and they'll do what you want, but they, they don't really invest themselves in the process as much. And so what was great with Victoria is like really from the get-go, even from the pilot, she said she wasn't really that keen on doing the pilot. And then when she actually got to do it, she went, I absolutely love being the person with the questions and knowing the answers and trying to tease the answers out of them. And so often she would recommend tweaks to questions or come up with the occasional question herself. So I thought we made a good team, and I left the show just as it was about to become popular on BBC Two. But for the people that were able to find us out on BBC Four, growing it from its sort of niche to it being relatively mainstream, and in the days when it was, I think, getting up to about 1 million on BBC Four, which I think was pretty impressive back in those days. I really enjoyed my time there.
And now it's so popular that even when she was on Taskmaster, they all thought every move she made was another gag for Taskmaster because they thought, well, let's get the BBC Two audiences, but that was never true. She really was just being funny for the sake of it, not just because she'd been ordered by Alex Horn to do something stupid.
I was surprised she went on there because I think she's quite careful about managing her sort of media appearance, which is uh, very understandable. But because she is very much a sort of, like I said, the person who likes to get the board games out at Christmas, the fact that she was able to sort of play something that somebody else had set up was I presume was very appealing to her. So there we are.
And one of the things you've recently done that emerged that Brian Cox both didn't know it had been renewed for a second series until he was on live TV and found out about it. And he didn't realise it was a game show until he got there and thought he was in a Bond film. What was it like working on 007 Road to a Million?
Well, that was fabulous. Not just because obviously everything was much bigger budget, much bigger scale, and something that everybody pretty much around the world, I think over 200 countries, you can watch that show, which pretty much guarantees that's the widest show I've ever worked on in terms of how visible it is. So I helped with a few of the early questions in terms of the general knowledge aspect of it. But mainly my role was to make sure that the production didn't go bankrupt. So uh, potentially, as you know from the setup of it, there's 9 different couples. They all have their own individual stories, and they can each individually win. Each individual couple can win £1 million. So you can potentially give away £9 million. And my job was to make sure that they didn't do that. So we had to sort of work out effectively like a millionaire style money ladder to go, well, look, if they start here and potentially there's up to £1 million here, how do we funnel this down so that we know that if the questions are certain difficulty level and the tasks that they have to do are a certain difficulty level, what is the rate of attrition? How quickly will the couples drop out, so that we get roughly the result we wanted. And I think pretty much it went to plan. I think maybe the contestants were a bit better or luckier than we perhaps planned at the very end, but it was certainly within the guesstimates that we had. Um, but the team at 72 Films who did that show are absolutely brilliant. They just the setups that they had, the access that they got, and the way it was filmed, just the fact that they could even produce something like that on a fraction of a budget that a real Bond film would have. It's got a bit of criticism from Bond fans saying, "Oh, it was not Bond enough," because the questions weren't based on Bond. But it's not. The idea wasn't that these players were pretending to be Bond. I think that would have been a big mistake. Um, the contestants were in going on an adventure inspired by Bond. They were not James Bond. They couldn't be James Bond, and it would look really bad if they were James Bond. So that's why it was done the way it was.
And having Brian Cox in it and having that element of the he's watching everyone is a type of thing that you would see in a Bond film. And it is really funny when you read about how Brian Cox went, "Oh, I really want to be a Bond villain, I really want to be a Bond villain." He was going to be in this and didn't read it all properly and realise it was a game show when he got there. I thought he was going to be in the Bond film, which he loved it still, apparently, according to him on the 6 o'clock show in Ireland. He really enjoyed his time, and he's found out there and then there was a second series, so he was quite surprised. He was sat in an armchair.
Well, not to contradict you, but my understanding is that they have been asked to cast for a second series. I don't think that's been greenlit yet. So I think maybe a researcher on that show might have put two and two together and got five. But we are looking at potentially uh, gearing up for a second series. I've been asked to potentially reserve some dates to just look at the numbers again for if it gets another go. I really hope it gets another go because I thought it was just brilliantly done. The like I said, the production team did a fantastic job on it, and there's definitely more room to have similar adventures.
I reckon someone needs to go and tell Brian Cox now that it's not been 100% because he was sat at home and he was doing it over Zoom because he didn't want to go to Ireland probably. And they were filming it and he was having a whale of a time and they were really surprised because he didn't know beforehand. So now that we've come to the conclusion that it's not 100% accurate, someone needs to ring up his agent and go, "It's not completely accurate, don't get his hopes up. Don't quit all his roles." And not only have you worked on the mega corporation that is 007, and probably, in my opinion, the future of where reality slash quiz and game shows will merge. What was it like working on the like the beginning of a interesting format, the UK version of Treasure Hunt?
Well, so I was actually on the remake. I did the 1990s, late 1990s remake of it with Susie Perry, which was an interesting twist on the classics of Annika Rice show. I was too young to work on the Annika Rice one, but obviously I was a massive fan of it. I still remember watching the end of that at the when there'd still be like 3 minutes away and the gong would go off and they would go, oh, they haven't got the money. But I was lucky enough to work on the remake of that. We did a few tweaks on it. I always felt that like it was never quite explained the clues, how they work sometimes. So when a clue was solved, if they said, "Oh, that bit means that," we would get that bit of the clue to be highlighted, and then it would sort of disappear after a while, so that it becomes easier for the viewers to follow. And then also what they did was they made clues 4 and 5 the same location. So rather than have this scenario that I just described and with them being miles away, and when time ran out, they were always going to be close. It could just be a short run to the fifth clue if they could just find where it was in time. So we made a couple of tweaks to it. The other main tweak to it, of course, was that it was, for some reason, again, the BBC seems to give me massive budgets on the shows I worked with. They made this a daytime show, but it was set in foreign locations. So we had New Zealand, Australia, the USA, um, and we had these amazing locations to work with, which is kind of weird, if I have to be honest, because the the original shows, when they had the foreign specials, in the mix with the UK shows, would never rate quite as well, because I think the audience just liked the familiarity of seeing that, oh, you know, they're in Cleethorpes this week rather than in Cozumel or Monaco or whatever. Yeah, it was a bit strange that they went for the ultra glamorous, very expensive, less well rating version of the show.
And with Channel 5 having axed Annika Rice's Challenge Annika after 4 episodes and faffing about, with that money, do you reckon that it would work well if Channel 5 did a reboot of Treasure Hunt with Annika Rice back in it now that they know that she wants to be back on TV?
Well, maybe I think perhaps you could do something where maybe she's the host presenter, and then you get a new Skyrunner. Um, when you do reboots, there's very few reboots that seem to do very well if you keep the existing people. So I mean, just look at something like, say, Through the Keyhole, where where you go from what was a format that had David Frost presenting it, and now it's Keith Lemon, isn't it? So just the shift in tone is massive on that, and yet I think that did pretty well. They had quite a few series of that. Um, I think when Ant and Dec brought back Saturday Night Takeaway, you had to use Ant and Dec because it just wouldn't have worked without them, and they're savvy enough to be able to update their act to move with the times. But by and large, when you bring back formats, you have to imbue modern sensibilities about how you bring back that format, and a lot of the time, unfortunately, for the original host, a lot of the time that does involve recasting it and having a more contemporary host. So maybe she could be involved in some way, but if I was going to do it, then, and I think you could definitely absolutely do it. Maybe you sort of go, well, who is the next new Annika Rice? Who's the next person we can make a star out of?
Yeah, because Annika Rice has now turned. Well, it took on into the Richard Herring podcast. She now does stand up as well, and she's turning into a comedian. And you were saying there about how reboots sometimes don't always work, but what really works well, in my opinion, is when the original host of the program is on board with having the new host. Like, for instance, with the New Deal and No Deal, we all know that Noel Edmonds is well, he lives in New Zealand, so he must be happy. He's happy that we've got Stephen Mulhern doing it. So that type of thing is like Stephen Mulhern wants to keep it to the original, but also now he knows he's got blessing from the original host. He knows that nothing can go wrong, and the viewers will go along with him because they know it's Noel Edmonds' choice, not anyone else's.
Yeah, and we had a similar situation on Crystal Maze when Richard O'Brien didn't want to get typecast. He said, I've had 4 series of Crystal Maze. I want to step down. But he was magnanimous and officially handing over the reins to Ed Cheetah for Series 5. And Ed was his own character. He did his thing, put his stamp on it. So yeah, I agree. I think you don't want the old presenter sniping from the sidelines, going, well, in my day we didn't do it like that. I mean, yeah, we know that's why kind of, you're not presenting it anymore.
And do you reckon that the Crystal Maze doing the regular series when it came back with Richard Iwadi instead of Stephen Thingamajig in the I know his last name, but it's escaped me.
Stephen Merchant.
Stephen Merchant who shaved his head for something else, but it was filming at the same time. Do you reckon that the Crystal Maze was affected to having the regular series on E4 and having the celebrity version on Channel 4?
Well, I, I don't really quite understand this um, rush. I can almost time with a stopwatch the first celebrity show being made. In the old days, you'd have several series of a regular civilian show. And then you sort of go, well, this is doing quite well. Maybe we should now have a few celebrity episodes, like what we did with Only Connect. Now you're having these very strange, well, I think are very strange commissions where you say, okay, we're going to have 8 celebrity shows, sorry, 8 regular civilian shows, but we'll also have 3 celebs shows as well. And you sort of go, well, why? Does that mean that your format isn't good enough that you feel like it's going to be better if you have celebrities on it? Why do you think that you need celebrities for it? Um, I understand if you need to have 1 or 2 Christmas specials, you might want to have celebrities for it, or if it's for stand up for cancer or maybe something like that. I get that, but why to have this very confusing mix? I think for a long time there were many episodes, at least 3 or 4 episodes of the regular civilian Crystal Maze shows that didn't go out for months, maybe over a year after they were filmed, just because there were other episodes of the celebrity one that they wanted to put out. So yeah, I do think the scheduling of it was somewhat botched, if I have to be honest.
Yeah, and do you reckon that if another channel picked it up to bring it back with anyone else hosting, do you reckon then that would bring back the popularity of where it was, or do you reckon that the show's now lost its way a little bit?
Um, I think that the basic premise of it is still very solid, of having people do stressful challenges in a short period of time. Uh, if I was going to bring it back, I would like almost title it something like Revenge of the Crystal Maze and have the challenges be a lot more dangerous, at least apparently more dangerous. I think some of the best challenges on the original show were things that like had a bit of a secret little plot to them, like the bomb diffusing game that like if you didn't connect the wires in time, the bomb would blow. The bomb would blow up after 3 minutes, which is just a lighting effect. It wasn't anything major. Or you had things with spikes or things that moved or things that just had a little bit of threat to them. And I think that was a little bit lost in the remake. Um, so if I was bringing it back, I think you could bring it back, but I would call it Revenge of the Crystal Maze and have it a little bit more not extreme. Just have the games, maybe do slightly fewer games, but put a bit more budget into them so that they had a bit more special effects going on. Because I think what was brilliant about Road to a Million was that the fact that you looked at these contestants climbing up a crane or whatever, you just went, "Ooh, wow, that I really would not like to do that." If they've won the money doing these things, they absolutely have earned the money. And I think there is a the kind of 9 to 5 quizzes of like the chase and pointless and things like that. They People are trying to launch new quizzes and not really any of them are sticking. I think if we can go back to a little bit more of spectacle,
Yeah,
however that whether it's entertainment spectacle or drama spectacle, put a bit more spectacle into shows to make them a bit more must watch rather than this sort of background noise that you just happen to have on while you're chopping your onions making the tea. Make everything a bit more appointment to watch is the way forward.
And why do you reckon that the short-lived, when I say short-lived, I really mean short-lived, it's like blink and you'll miss it. Why do you reckon that the American version of the Crystal Mage didn't really like leave its like become successful is the correct word I was looking for, become as successful as the UK one, even though it was filmed in the exact same studio as the revival of the UK version?
Um, it's never really travelled that well. And I don't. I think sometimes there are formats that just don't travel that well because they're just very parochial. Of- Having said that, bizarrely, I think there were in the old days, the original run of Crystal Maze, there were theme parks dedicated to the Crystal Maze in places like Dubai and Hong Kong, um, because randomly somebody decided to set them up. But anyway, I uh, if you take, I think Only Connect is a very good example of a show that just doesn't travel because its outlook, its humour, and the level of knowledge required for it are all quite British. I mean, Britain, after all, is the as uh, Paul Smith from Celador said when they were setting up Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. They said that the quiz is a very British invention. We kind of invented although the word is Irish, the so the the Isles, our Isles, the quizzing is a very British um, concept. So sometimes the ideas don't travel. I think they did a pretty good job of it, and Adam Conover was a really good choice to host. And he did his thing, and I think it served a purpose for them. And I don't think it was a great flop, but I didn't think it was, neither did I think it was a show that would run and run and run. But I didn't really have much involvement in the remake, so it didn't really, wasn't any skin off my back.
And one of the things that you did that again seemed like a good format to bring back, but didn't slightly work on the bringing back of it. But what was it like working on a program that weirdly I don't think personally should have been spelt with a K, but that might. What was it like working on the krypton factor? One of the words I said there were correct.
Grips and Facts were great. Um, so yeah, I used to love the original Crips and Factor. It's like to me, the start of the autumn season on television was the week when you'd have the Crips and Factor back on ITV was at 7 o'clock on Mondays, and I think Ethics would be on BBC on the same night. I think on the other side, um, and that was just to me at the time they were the kind of pinnacles of quizzing to me. I just thought they were both brilliantly um, presented and produced programs in terms of the set design, the graphics, the questions, the challenges. They were all brilliant. And so yeah, when they brought back the Kitchen Factor for Quick Spin, they they said, "Can you come up with some games for it?" So some of the games were quite traditional. Going back to the original show, I think one of the ones I did was sort of you had to put like the jigsaw pieces for the word Krypton, but you were basically looking at a mirror image of it, so you had to kind of do hand-eye coordination. So that was kind of traditional, but they also have they managed to find these amazing tables that were like they had like a projector in them, but they were really clever because they had like sort of sensitivity on the table surface. And if you put like an object, like a cup or a mirror or something on the surface of these tables, the table could interact with it and go, "Oh, I know that I've got a mirror in this place." So that was brilliant for games design because you could just say, we had one round where it was like a pretend laser was on the table, and then you give them like several mirrors to put down, and then the table could react to it and redirect the laser. So that was great. So that was really innovative. I don't think they make those things anymore. Not like that anyway. Not with that technology. But yeah, that was really fun.
And so not only have you done worked on all these things, you also do something that is an ever-growing popular format. Where did the idea of your podcast come about?
It's lateral.
Yeah,
So Tom Scott, who's the presenter of Lateral, he's a YouTuber with about 6 million followers. And at the time, they had this facility in London called YouTube Space, which was this relatively, well, it's medium-sized television studio with a lot of kit, a lot of space, some lighting available, that have all really some fancy DSLR cameras that could record at ridiculously high resolutions. And he said, I can get access to the studio for free. What can we do with it? So we came up with this format called Lateral, which was a style of lateral thinking puzzles that I absolutely adore, where you sort of say, well, here's a weird situation that's happened. How did this come about? And it's in the we did this thing in the studio, and it was sort of like 6 or 7 episodes or something, and we put it out on YouTube, and it got like about 500,000 viewers or so per episode. And that was quite a good success for a niche show like that. And then but it's not the sort of show that you can do regularly, because you're not going to get the income back for the amount of work that you put into it. But it was we did shop it around a couple of production places, and I think one at least one company optioned it and tried to sell it, but it just didn't happen. Tom said, well, no, I wouldn't mind doing a podcast. And I said, well, why don't we bring back Lateral and do the sort of the main question idea from that as a podcast? But one of the first things I did actually after leaving my 9 to 5 job as a management consultant was I was invited onto a BBC4 panel game called Puzzle Panel, where the idea was that their panelists would bring a puzzle, and then they would sort of tease all the other people, the other guests, and sometimes the host if they weren't in on the joke. So I just went, well, we could just use that sort of idea of like, everybody has a certain number of questions each, and everybody just asks each other questions. And so that's basically what it is. It's just a fun 45-minute show where we get through about 7 of these puzzles, and they just chat around them. There's no stakes, there's no points or prizes. It's just a fun listen of doing a few jokes while we solve these things.
So would you say that the type of program that Tom's I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name. I'll be here all day attempting that. The type of shows that he's done, would you say they're more traditional quiz shows, or would you say they would class as a panel show hybrid, or the alternative name that I love to call them, a panel game? Do you reckon that would like cross that barrier?
It's been pointed out to him and us both that the style of show that we put out is very much of the 90s. Thomas, one of his most popular videos was how he likes the titles to "It'll Be All Right on the Night," and I loved that series as well, because of the work that they put in on making all of the title sequences special for each year that it would come out. We had the food blogger Adam Ragusia as a guest on the show recently, and he came on being a little bit passive aggressive in a joking way about it, saying like, why do you have like a title sequence, or why do you have like a script and an opening joke and stuff like that? Isn't that really old fashioned, and like you're still in the 90s? And it's like me and Tom were going like, yep, that's right, because that's sort of the sort of shows that we grew up with, and we do it because we have standards, and we there is a modern way of doing these things now where people just sort of crash straight into it, crash start, or they um, just blurbs the first thing that comes into their head. They don't particularly script things as tightly as we do, but that's just the style of what we're going for. We're just trying to do a slightly more modern take of a show, but the show in itself is perhaps quite a traditional style idea.
And do you reckon that YouTube is the breeding ground for innovative and interesting new game shows and panel shows? Because, for instance, I know that in my realm of YouTube on my main channel, Tom Mason, which is Doctor Who, I run a Doctor Who panel show, and a few people other do Doctor Who quiz shows, and they do.
Mhm.
And do you reckon that YouTube is a good place to for people to hone their craft of generating fun, interesting, quiz-based shows on a smaller, even smaller budget than you would have for like a TV channel or like a more well-known YouTuber?
Um, I think the place where that kind of embryonic format development is going on is actually in Twitch. So there are three people in particular who are doing things like that. One's called Ash the Bash, one's called Royal Flush, and another's called Topper One Gaming. And they do recreations of old formats, but they also do their own stuff. They come out with their own formats, and some of them are absolutely brilliant. They absolutely could be on television, and I would like to see some of them definitely be on TV. But currently, they're only about maybe 50 or 60 people are playing these each night, but they could actually absolutely be played by millions. Each of them have all definitely done at least one format that I think is absolutely ready to go on television. So there are people out there who are doing these things and making these shows. In terms of like where should this happen? I mean, what's happening is that YouTube people are trying to get on television, but the television industry is saying that the future's in YouTube. Everybody thinks that the grass is greener on the other side, and there's a bit of truth in that. Um, but like for example, if I said to you like what do you think the biggest ratings in terms of millions has been for a format like The Wheel? Just what would you guess as a ballpark figure as being the biggest rated episode of The Wheel?
I would say an episode that would include a YouTuber because they would have brought their audience with them.
Yeah, and what figure would you put on that in terms of millions?
I would say about 2.3 million.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite a big show. I think they've had episodes of 4 or 5 million easily, but I think the number one biggest rated show was 26 million because that's the one that the Sidemen did. They got access to the Wheel studio and they kind of made their own episode using the real set,
Yeah,
and it just goes to show you, and like they probably have got somewhere in over £50,000, uh, maybe more revenue just off the views of that. So then you sort of think, well, hang on a second, the actual cost of making an episode of a fairly cheap quiz show is about that. So are we getting to the realms now where revenue streams are such that people could just bypass the whole commissioning system of television and go, I'm going to just make my own TV formats. But as we've seen from things like Nebula's Jet Lag the Game, uh, there are cheaper and faster and quicker ways of making shows that don't mean you have to bog yourself down with a lot of the downsides that a full television production involves. So it's very interesting period of time in television, and how YouTube is learning from television, but also television needs to update its ways of working to reflect the the way that YouTube works.
yeah. And so, coming toward the end of this glorious and very insightful interview, this is your opportunity to tell people where they can find you, but don't give away your home address.
Well, on X or Twitter, I'm David J. Bodycombe, spelled Combe at the end. That's where my news is. If you want to listen to me rant more, I run a podcast with my colleague Justin Scroggy, who I've worked with since the original Crystal Maze. We talk about what's happened with the television industry and touch on a lot of the points that we've raised here. And that's a podcast called TV Show and Tell. That's available anywhere that has podcasts. And then the Lateral podcast, which I produce, but I'm not on, but I produce in the background. They do all the question editing for. That's called Lateral with Tom Scott. And that's out weekly every Friday. And again, it's completely free and it can be found anywhere where you get your podcasts.
And the Crystal Maze TV series is available on BritBox for anyone that wants to relive the magic moments of any. I don't know how many series are on BritBox, but I know a lot of them are on BritBox. And I previously mentioned there my panel show Time Lords. New episodes should be coming, but you know what they're like. Guests are hard to find, or the availability is a nightmare. Yeah, they're all trying to release this episode of Doctor Who. They've got more time. They've got to quickly watch and review it before anyone else has. So more episodes of my panel show Time Lords will be coming soon with more updates, because I don't think I've used the new stuff yet. So there's brand new stuff that I am very excited to divulge into the world, and there'll be more interviews from me next week, because there will be, and it'll be amazing. And I'm always doing everything. I'm doing everything because I've got 20 YouTube channels and 12 podcasts, so I do too much. Yes, I know I do too much, but I'm everywhere, so you'll never get rid of me. So, anyway, guys, thank you guys for watching, and thank you for letting me interview you.
Welcome.
And thank you guys for watching, and remember, no, I've forgotten.